And that's why nobody wants the Palestinians, because they know they're going to give up all the Temple Mount, all that stuff that is so big in Islam. They're going to give that right up, and that will be gone. And then, then the third temple, and then craziness.
Yeah.
So
that's wild.
I want to get into October 7th for you. I feel like, we had the releasing of these hostages. It could have been done quick, easy, but of course Israel picks to kill 200 people, women and children. Nobody's saying anything about that. All the people that march for BLM are really, a lot of them are silent. I know that. I'm talking about Hollywood, When we watch the roast of Tom Brady and Tony Hinchcliffe does a joke about how Jeffrey Ross likes, Jeffrey Ross is so Jewish. His favorite part of the football game is the coin flip. And he loves when they throw deep bombs at brown people and the whole place got quiet. Do you hear that? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. No, all the BLM people in Hollywood now are okay with people getting slaughtered. Children, dude, children getting slaughtered. But we get into the October 7th, and I went on Jesse Lee Peterson's show, and he's a Zionist, and I like him. But I go, hey, dude, how come they moved the festival like 24 hours closer to the border? Why did they short an Israeli ETF? Well, this, and this. What are your whole thoughts?
Oh, well, I mean, man, there's 45 different angles to get into around how obvious there's something that went on that day. I mean, whether it's the foreknowledge, and it goes back months, not just Egypt and different things that happened within a few weeks, but I mean, there were examples of their own people on their different posts trying to inform their commanders about how they saw the training, they're getting ready, and they said, if you bring this up again, we'll put you in jail. That's literally that. I think that was Haaretz that reported that, and we saw the foreign countries that were saying, this is happening, it's coming. For that first point, my opinion is ultimately the thing that makes the most sense, actually, is that there's elements of their government that absolutely allowed this to happen for whatever reason, whether it's prophecies, whether it's manufacturing more reason to justify their existence. But I think that there's at least some element there that makes me think that some of them might not have been, but it's just as likely that this was completely allowed. I mean, there's also, I guess, one of the people argue that it was just that they are not as good at what they do as they pretend to be. That's also certainly possible. But after that, I mean, there's so many elements to this that are so wildly ignored by the establishment, as the Hannibal Directive example, where we have now, I mean, tank drivers, helicopter pilots, the security heads of the kibbutz area himself said that we saw them shoot their own people. We saw Yasmin Porat, who's been one of the most recognized figures in all this, who is an Israeli Jew herself from the kibbutz, who said she was in the building. She came out, she watched them bomb people in there. We have hostages coming back saying that they shot at people while they were being rescued on their way back to Gaza. Then they came back and they said that they were bombing them while they were there. They were most scared of Israeli bombings. You've seen them shoot in cold blood their own hostages. 3 of them that came out waving a sign saying "Save us," and they shoot 2 of them. One runs away. 15 minutes later, and this is reported by Haaretz, they're coaxing him back out. He's saying, I'm saying things in Hebrew. Don't shoot me. They call him back out. 2 of them shoot him dead. That's the 3 hostages they killed. I just don't know how in the world you can watch that story. And this was Haaretz reported this, that you don't see an element of, we don't want them to come home. For those that don't know the Hannibal Directive, public and verifiable reality. It comes from I think it was I don't know if it was a general, a high-ranking Israeli official who was taken. And it cost them dearly, both in their reputation, and they had to send a whole bunch of people back that they had, illegally detained to get this person back. And so they decided, look, in the future, if this happens, we kill them, all of them, to save ourselves all of this problem. And they, I guess, rationalized that's better for Israel people. And so when this happened, there's a colonel from Israel who on the record said this was a mass Hannibal. It's very, the Cradle did a great article about it. He's on record. And you can see that they're ordering to shoot people as they leave, or at the very least, they said shoot anything that's moving, whether or not there might be civilians. And there's actually calls on the record from the radios where they're going, well, there might be civilians there, and they tell them to fire anyway. So there's very clear overlaps that show you something's very wrong about this. I mean, there's so many levels to what could have happened around October 7th. Efrat Fangenson, who is an Israeli Jew who's been talking about this from the beginning, is She's said this was an operation, like false flag level, like to the point of where it's like a lie hop, like let it happen on purpose kind of a thing. And I think it makes the most sense. But either way, now going forward, it's explicit. I think it's obvious they do not want people to come back. That's my opinion. But every time they get these hostages back, they come back and say they were treated well, they were fed. You know, obviously they're kidnapped, and I'm not downplaying that, especially the ones that aren't military targets, whether IDF or police, you know, just like the children that were taken, for example, or the younger ones. Those are crimes. But my point is that they're kidnapped. That's terrifying in its own right. But they come back, and some of them look like they gained weight. And this is not my opinion. It's very clear. And they've been saying that they treated them well. They let them go shopping. I mean, how crazy is that? Then you look at the Palestinians coming back of the Israeli prisons, 100%. And they're emaciated. They've lost limbs. It's terrifying.
Yeah, you know, I made a joke, and Dana's like, oh, too soon, but I'm like, you know, they look like they all got back from fat camp. That's what they look like they got back from. Like, you know, they're just like, oh, so hard. They did, you know, they made us work out and all this stuff. And it did look like it was a bad hostage situation. And, you know, I'm really glad you bring that up, Ryan, because, you know, for me, it's like I'm really in this place right now where when I take a look at the Holocaust and I go, what happened there? You know, this is Sam speaking, not Ryan. He could jump in if he wants. He doesn't have to. But, you know, for me, it's like, I think they just took out the Orthodox. I think the people who were anti setting up Israel, because it's stuff within the holy books say that it's not supposed to happen. They just took them all out and got rid of them, and that's my opinion. I'll stand behind it.
We're talking about October 7th. You're talking about
the Holocaust. What I'm saying is the Holocaust. But the reason I bring this up is because they'll sacrifice their own. That's what people don't understand. Like, you know, if you take a look at 9/11, it's not even just like Zionists. It's just like anybody in power. Right. They have zero problems with taking out their owns if it's a means to an end. So, 100%. You know, and it's just like, if you go, oh, these people were behind 9/11, you have people go, oh, there were these people in there. Why would America do that? Why would Israel do that? Dude, no, dude. They have no problem with taking out their own. If it leads to bigger, if let's say there was a time where there was no internet and everyone didn't have a phone on their with a camera, and we didn't know anything that was going on there, the story would be Hamas killed all these people. Right. It wouldn't be the IDF did it. It wouldn't be any of that directive. It would be the Hamas did it, and all of Israel would have lost their mind. All of the Jews around the world would have lost their mind, and they would be so mad at the Palestinians. But now, because of phones and just hard work of people who literally sacrifice their life, are like, no, dude, this was the IDF just pulling a Hannibal directive, man, and just killing everybody. I mean, there's a history of it.
But that's important. It's important to point out the kind of independent media side of this, which is clearly why they're so desperately trying to censor and shut down platforms, because there's a way around what they're trying to do now. But, you know, I also want to point out, though, Robert Inlakesh is a great writer for TLAV, and he has done a lot of work on this really extensively. And we should acknowledge there's evidence that I think is undeniable that there were elements, whether both Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or just random civilians, that all came through the openings in these fences. So there's all these overlaps to where there could be any number of people that were involved or responsible, and there is evidence of them killing people that were not POWs, people that were not military targets. And I'll actually explain why I say that. But then or like, for example, taking children back. Those are crimes. I've said that since day one. There's no way you argue that those were valid targets. So we can have an objective conversation and say that you can prove, and it's objective at this point based on their own sources, that the IDF, whether it be Hannibal directive or not, was killing their own people, whether accidentally or not. That happened, and arguably the majority. But you can clearly see that there was something else happening there. But why I say military target, let's not forget, and this is what gets people so upset, and this is what frustrates me about the political game. We can't just be objective about this. Under the Fourth Geneva Convention, a occupied territory, which no matter what the screams and narratives are, that's what this is occupied territory, according to everybody who was standing in the conversation, which means they have a legal right to armed resistance, whether it was random people in Palestine, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, doesn't matter. They're acting in the resistance of Palestine. They have a legal right to attack military targets and military entities, right? And take them as POWs and detainees. That's what war is. So when that happened, it was legally protected. People like Francesca Albanese, human rights for the United Nations has made this clear. Then, if there were crimes committed, whether it was rape or torture or shooting innocent people or kidnapping, those are crimes. Those two things can exist at the same time. But we get into this hyperbolic conversation about where they just kind of whitewash it into one direction. And I think that's the larger point, right? That we're trying to hide this behind something it's not. And to your point, because of people like us are highlighting these things and showing them what they're seeing, and then, of course, showing what's happening in Gaza, it's shaken to the core a lot of people, Zionists, Israelis, Jews, Christians, Americans, because they never saw this coming. And I would point out that, as Adam Green highlighted, there's more Christian Zionists in the world than there are Jewish Zionists.
I agree.
Game they play where we're saying it's only Jews. No, that doesn't make sense based on that exact point.
I always say this: not all Jews are Zionists, and all Zionists are Jews.
Right.
You know, and again, they're all working together. But then we start to see in America this real awakening of the effects that one area has. Now, Johnny, we've had the discussion. Why do you think they call it the State of Israel?
I think it's irrelevant. I mean, this in political science, a state is a country. So
Okay. I mean,
that's what I think. I don't think you're referencing this conspiracy theory that it's like an American state, right?
well, it's either an American state or it's, it's just part of this country in some weird kind of way, almost like in Alaska in a weird way. But what we're starting to see is like maybe it's not our territory. Maybe we're their territory.
No, that I buy.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Well, you remember that it started from Lord Rothschild, the British, and the Balfour Declaration, right? And so you could see an overlap of more than just the United States there. But I would argue that there's been, the colonial mindset is not just Israel. Obviously, Britain, the United States, to this very day, quite frankly. And so it could clearly be an overlap of a lot of things. And I think you can prove that there is wild. I'm in fact not going to get into who and what, but I'm having this conversation today online with somebody back and forth about how it's undeniable, pulling aside all of the nonsense, all of the propaganda and the narratives, that AIPAC has an overwhelming influence over policy, over politicians, like not lobbying style, but like way beyond that. And I can explain that if you'd like. But then Israel itself, obviously, has an overwhelming influence over the outcome of policy in this country. And they're both the same thing, in my opinion, but they're both separate topics. And that can't be contentious. They themselves are praising this. They just recently, I think MSNBC, for crying out loud, did a breakdown showing you that AIPAC funded every single leader on every side of the both sides of the paradigm. There's something wrong there when you recognize that they're pulling funding or spending millions to have somebody removed or to challenge policy.